When a family breaks apart, even two loving parents can end up on opposite sides of a really painful divide. And when they just can't agree, a judge has to step in and decide a child's entire future. I wish I could spend many more days with Dad. These are the words of a little girl named Emily, and she's caught right in the middle. You see, her Sybil wish, well, it became the very heart of this huge legal battle. And it's a battle that really forces all of us to ask some tough questions about what it even means to be a family. I mean, think about it. What happens when both parents genuinely believe they're doing what's best, but their ideas of best are polar opposites? This is the story of that impossible choice. So let's meet Emily's parents, Jonathan and Rebecca. After they separated, they tried to do the right thing, to build a life for their daughter across two homes. Their goal was a 50-50 split, right down the middle. But, as we're about to see, their two worlds were on a collision course. Okay, so this really gets to the heart of the problem. Rebecca's home, it was all about routine and structure. Clear rules, a real focus on discipline, a life with a predictable rhythm. Jonathan's home, on the other hand, was all about flexibility and fun. It was a place for entertainment, excitement, and a really strong emotional connection. Now, both of them were clearly loving parents, but their styles, wow, they couldn't have been more different. And what started out as this well-intentioned 50-50 plan, it quickly turned into a source of real anxiety for Rebecca. She started noticing changes in her daughter Emily, and they were changes that she found deeply, deeply troubling. So from Rebecca's point of view, every time Emily came back from her dad's place, her behavior would just worsen. She'd become defiant. She was having trouble sleeping, and even her eating routines were getting disrupted. Rebecca was convinced that the constant back and forth between these two completely different worlds was creating chaos. She really feared that this lack of consistency was actually harming her daughter's development. And this timeline, it shows you just how fast everything spiraled out of control. In May, they separate. By June, they're trying out the 50-50 schedule. But just 3 months later, Rebecca's concerns lead to a court stepping in with a temporary order that just slashes Jonathan's time with his daughter. And just like that, their friendly agreement was gone. It was replaced by this tense legal countdown to a final binding decision. For Jonathan, this was absolutely devastating. The court's order basically turned him from an equal parent into, well, a visitor in his own daughter's life. He wasn't there for the little things anymore, the school mornings, the weeknight dinners. He was suddenly just a weekend dad. And that was a role he never, ever wanted. So, here they are, at a complete impasse. Jonathan looks at Emily and sees her sadness, and he's convinced the answer is more time with him. Rebecca looks at Emily and sees instability, and she's certain the solution is a more consistent home with her. Both of them are acting out of love, right? But in doing so, they're pulling their daughter in two completely different directions. The court did not focus on emotion. It asked one key legal question. And this is what it all came down to. When is it actually justified to severely limit a child's time with one of their parents? The whole case hinged on that. It wasn't about who was the better parent. It was about whether there was a truly legitimate, evidence-backed reason to create such a massive imbalance in her life. So the court's job was to cut through all the emotion and just focus on the cold, hard evidence. They had to take Rebecca's very real fears and weigh them against these fundamental legal principles that say a child has a right to a relationship with both parents. And just look at this. This chart shows the arrangement Rebecca was actually asking the court for. We're talking 25.5 days a month for her and only 4.5 for Jonathan. I mean, that's a huge change. An imbalance that big meant she had to come up with a really compelling, evidence-based reason to justify it. And this brings us to a huge legal principle that really guided the whole case. The Supreme Court precedent is crystal clear on this. The starting point, the default position, is that a child's well-being is best served by having a meaningful relationship with both parents. If you want to restrict that, you can't just do it because you disagree on parenting styles. You need a powerful, evidence-based reason. So the court went through Rebecca's claims, one by one, and tested them against the facts. Okay, claim 1. Emily's behavioral issues are caused by the 50-50 split. Well, the court looked at medical records, and it turns out those issues actually started before the parents even separated. Next claim, Emily has sleep disturbances. But an actual EEG test, it showed her sleep patterns were completely normal. And the biggest claim, that Jonathan's parenting style was actively harmful, there just wasn't any evidence to back that up. Then came a really crucial piece of evidence. The court appointed an independent psychologist to evaluate the whole family, and the finding was unambiguous. Both parents were loving, both were capable, and get this, their different styles were actually seen as complementary, a benefit to Emily. So the psychologist's official recommendation? A 50-50 shared parenting model. But wait, then there's a twist. Another group, a local guardianship authority, weighed in, and they recommended a completely different plan. It was a little more time for Jonathan than Rebecca wanted, sure, but it was still only about 8.5 days a month. That's a huge departure from the 50-50 split the psychologist had recommended. So the court had two conflicting recommendations. They looked very closely at the one from the guardianship authority and found a major flaw. Basically, the authority acknowledged the psychologist's detailed report and then just completely ignored its main conclusion. They didn't offer any solid reasoning for why they disagreed with the expert. And for a court, an opinion that just throws out expert evidence without a good explanation, well, it doesn't carry much weight. So, with all the pieces on the table, the medical records, the expert testimony, that conflicting recommendation, and of course, Emily's own words, the court was finally ready to make its decision. And it all came back to those fundamental principles of family law. And the court's final decision was 50-50 shared parenting, a return to where it all started. The judge affirmed that principle of equal parental involvement and, in doing so, restored Jonathan's role as a full-time father in his daughter's life. So what are the big takeaways from all this? Well, first, just disagreeing about parenting styles, rules versus fun, is not enough to limit a parent's rights. Second, the law starts with the idea that it's best for a child to have a real, meaningful relationship with both parents. Third, and this one is so important, if you're going to claim that a situation is causing harm, your fears, no matter how genuine, aren't enough. You have to back it up with objective evidence. And finally, the court listened to the child. It gave real weight to what Emily herself said she wanted, more time with her dad. And that leaves us with this really profound question, doesn't it? When you're trying to raise a child between two homes, what does that child need more? Is it the perfect consistency of one single routine? Or is it the love and emotional richness that comes from having both parents fully and equally present in their life? In this case, the court made its choice, but that's a dilemma that so many families have to navigate for themselves.